In 2017, Dream Daddy, a dad dating simulator, took the gaming community by storm, quickly becoming the top-selling game on Steam that summer. Tyler Hutchinson, the game's director, has said that the concept of Dream Daddy was initially very ambitious, but that due to limited budget and a mere 9-month timeframe for game development, the team wasn't able to deliver the totality of their vision. Even with these limitations, Dream Daddy is easily one of the most progressive games I've ever played. That being said, in this video we're going to delve a little deeper. Hi, I'm Sara, pronouns she, they, and welcome to Game Assist. In this series, we'll be reviewing queer representation in video games, so join me for an inquiry into Dream Daddy, a dad dating simulator. First, some quick trigger warnings for the content ahead. I'll be discussing alcoholism and depression, and there will be a brief mention of domestic violence. The game's character creation screen, lovingly entitled Build That Dad, is one of its most notorious features, particularly due to its inclusion of binder bods. For those who might not know, binders are used by some trans people in order to flatten breast tissue. Unsurprisingly, emotional testaments from trans players on the internet testify to the importance of this representation, to be able to actually play a trans character. That being said, wearing a binder is not the only way to be trans, and it is not the only way to be a trans dad. Build That Dad, for a character creation mechanic in an indie game made in 9 months and with little budget, blows a lot of AAA character creation mechanics out of the water. But even so, I want to push further. I want to push for dads with boobs, dads wearing makeup, dads in dresses and skirts. There are so many ways to be a dad beyond binary gender, beyond arbitrary signifiers of masculinity, or indeed femininity. Dream Daddy's developers have said that trans inclusion was extremely important to them, and truly, definitely by the standards of the gaming industry, they've done a pretty good job. In the intro, you have the option to choose adoption or birth, regardless of the gender of your partner or of your own gender. This accounts for birth by a surrogate, birth by a partner, or birth by your own character, an incredibly important step in the representation of queer parenthood and queer families. But while on-screen trans representation is pretty groundbreaking here, what about the production of the game? Were any of the writers or other team members on this project trans? How much input was there directly from trans people? If trans inclusion is important, an effort has to be made to recruit trans people as writers and developers. A significant portion of Dream Daddy's budget was used to hire consultants on the quality of representation in the game. So why not use some of this money to hire trans game devs? I am reminded that the inclusion of binder bods was a last-minute addition that took only 4 hours to build. Looking at gender and sexuality more broadly, while it can be positive to represent queerness as normalized, it can also be important to discuss it explicitly, something which Dream Daddy never really does. For example, if your dad's Sona is trans, you might want to talk to Damien about your shared experiences and to bond in this way. From my own perspective, while I don't necessarily want all of my everyday interactions to center around my queerness, I love talking to other queer people about being queer. It's empowering, and it's part of how we form such deep emotional bonds. The director of Dream Daddy has said that you can headcanon your dad's Sona to be any sexuality you wish, but it doesn't really work out this way in-game. For example, I would argue that the game isn't realistically designed to allow you to be asexual. Pretty much all of the routes in the game describe your dadsona being sexually attracted to your given dream daddy, so there is no option for romance without sex. There might not be very many, but there are women in this game, so let's talk about them. There is, of course, your dadsona's wonderful daughter, Amanda, and the daughters of the other dads, Briar, Hazel, and River Khan, Daisy Harding, Carmencita Sella, Christy Christensen, and Val Small. Christy is one of Joseph's creepy twins, and Val is Robert's daughter, the only adult daughter in the game, who only makes a very brief appearance at the end of Robert's route. The only prominent adult woman in this game is Mary Christensen, Joseph's wife. Unless you play Damien or Robert's routes, it's easy to dismiss her for a cheating wife, a neglectful mother, and generally a bad person. It's also easy to fall into this trap because of her alcoholism and because of her gender. Think about it. To a lot of fans, Robert's alcoholism is edgy and cool, and Joseph's cheating is hot, but Mary? At first, I thought this portrayal was supposed to make you feel like it's acceptable to romance a married man. It's not, by the way. After playing Robert and Damien's routes, as well as a certain cult ending, you learn that Mary is actually a deeply caring person, at least towards animals and towards certain people. Not only that, she's been systematically abused by her husband, which is the implied cause of her alcoholism. What's interesting about this is that it demonstrates an awareness of the, at times, incredibly toxic culture around slash fiction, riddled with the internalized misogyny of women themselves and the normalized misogyny of gay men. I'm reminded of the artist who posted gender-bent versions of the Dream Daddies on Twitter and received a barrage of death threats. Mary Christensen's characterization offers a refreshing subversion of the slash genre's uglier side, if you're open to seeing it. This is a game which has been praised for the inclusion of characters of color as well as trans characters. The character creation screen features a diverse set of skin tones, which look pretty realistic, and a monolid eye shape. It also has a decent range of hair types, including the natural hair, cornrows, dreads, flat top, and puff hair, which all look pretty good. But the most full-lipped mouth is called the hamburger mouth. I think the racist connotations are clear. Perhaps this shouldn't be surprising when we remember that white members of Game Grumps, the producers of Dream Daddy, have been recorded dropping the N-word on various occasions. Regarding NPCs, we've got the inclusion of Matt, Hugo, and Craig, Black, Latino, and East Asian queer men, respectively. There are a whole lot of really fetishistic stereotypes associated with these ethnicities amongst gay white men, but none of these three characters particularly fall into them, which is refreshing, because the bar is just that low. Having said that, there is a sense of race blindness in this game. Race is never really engaged with, certainly not how race impacts relationships and the power dynamics within them. I would echo my sentiments about the lack of trans people involved in writing and development, and extend it to queer people of color as well. A key theme in this game is mental health. Vernon Shaw and Leighton Gray, co-creators and co-writers of Dream Daddy, have spoken a good deal about how elements of the narrative are inspired by their own lives, including experiences with their families, with depression, and with anxiety. It definitely shows. Matt's social anxiety and your dadsona's fear of social interaction are palpable and very convincing. Even a brief interaction between Damien and his son, Lucien, feels real. After an incident at school, Lucien exclaims he won't go back to therapy, and instead of telling him off, Damien calmly reacts by saying that he won't force him and that he loves him. Quizmaster Quinn is a small character, and kind of feels like a caricature of a depressive person. But what particularly hits home is the way he jokes about his mental health in order to cope with it. Of course, in Quinn's case, it's pretty over the top, but what's important is the way the other characters react to him. Although he never explicitly asks for it, Joseph and Hugo see through his frankly terrible facade and offer to help him. They tell him it's okay not to be okay. In Hugo's route, the cul-de-sac dads even convince him to go to couples therapy with his wife. Although this therapy as cure depiction is a little bit reductive, therapy seems to entirely eradicate Quinn's symptoms and completely fix his marriage, it's still positive to show a mentally ill person getting help and getting better. The game depicts alcoholism at length, kind of well sometimes, but not always. I was really uncomfortable with the first couple of dates on Robert's route. I didn't at all like the idea that you had to drink with him to be able to go out with him. This is really inaccessible to people who don't drink or don't feel comfortable around people who are drunk. Maybe even triggering for those who, like me, have suffered from alcoholism in the past. It's true that you don't have to go down this route, but it completely pushes people who refuse to drink for various reasons out of the picture. You shouldn't feel obligated to drink in order to date someone. It isn't healthy. The conclusion of his route is quite satisfying, though, even if you never fully confront his drinking problem. In your final date with Robert, the only way to get his good ending is by telling him what he needs rather than what he wants. Returning one final time to the character creation screen in Dream Daddy, I want to note that your dadsona is necessarily able-bodied. You could certainly headcanon that they have an invisible disability, but it's difficult to maintain this due to some of the game's content, particularly during the Romance Craig route. The option to be in a wheelchair or to have a crutch could have been a step towards acknowledging the existence of disabled fathers and to explore what the dating scene is like for disabled people, especially when they're older. Now, just a couple of final tidbits which don't necessarily fit into the broader topics I've been discussing so far. First of all, I think it's about time we scrap certain dating sim archetypes, including dating a married man or dating your daughter's teacher. Lastly, as regards Joseph's route, rather than centering his narrative around his unhappy marriage, it would have been an interesting possibility to make him single and to focus his route on the nuances of navigating queer identity and faith. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. We'd also love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you to our patrons who make it possible for us to create videos like this, and please do consider supporting us through Patreon if you aren't already. Thank you for watching, and take care.